All right, here we are.
Hey, Dad.
Hey, Danielle. So, wow, we've been approaching this minute for a minute. So,
Yeah.
I am super excited. I know there's a few people joining already. I saw some friends of ours, some family members of ours already in the mix, and that is awesome. So, welcome everybody to this first installment of Dad from a Distance, which is our journey. So, Danielle and I are going to, over the next few weeks, actually leading up until Father's Day, talk a little bit about our journey and specifically our journey since we were separated about 28 years ago now from each other by divorce. And so there's a lot that we're going to cover. In fact, we're doing this in segments. In fact, let me get my act together here because I think there's supposed to be a little trailing thing, Danielle. Let me see if I can.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I think I can do that. There it is. There you go. Ground zero to Waffle House. So ground zero is day one. But what we talked about when we were preparing for this, which is really important to both of us, is why we're doing this in the first place. So why are we like putting this out there to the entire world? And so ladies first, Danielle. So why is this important?
So, I think as I've been growing up, I'll be 33 this year. So what's interesting is what we talked about yesterday while we were testing and things, is that I'm about the age you were when you went through the divorce with my mom. Mm-hmm. So I think that's interesting just because of perspective wise, I think I can be a little bit more thoughtful about things in general. But two is like, as I was growing up, I realized that I wanted to share my dad with people. There's so many, especially Black girls playing basketball, and people just overall, they don't always have great relationships with their father. And I did, and I do. And so I just was like, I just felt like it was purposeful that I should be able to share that because it is real. And I know that what it means for me as just a woman, having that. I mean, there's so many people, even like the other day was like, yeah, I can tell you have your dad in your life. You're softer, just little things that really make a difference. So, I mean, from all of those traveling trips, everybody wanted to be in my dad's car and all that stuff. And I find that that's kind of what's going to play a huge role here, is that there's a lot of people, I guess, from my perspective, that maybe didn't have their father, and what can they grab from you, and what can they grab from me, and what was my experience with that? Because sometimes I was embarrassed to have such a cool dad because that made me seem like I was perfect or whatever. So there was like a lot of different things going on. But all that to say, I think that this just needs to be told, and I think representation in general, seeing a very healthy, long-term father-daughter relationship is really important. So that's my That's my why. What
That,
about you, Daddy-O?
that is an awesome why. And
Yeah.
just so you guys know, a lot of these questions that we're asking each other, I had no idea where Danielle really was going with that. So, but
We
you
didn't
know,
talk beforehand
we
for
did
this.
not. There were a few times where we almost stumbled into a conversation because we're so used to
Like,
doing
nope,
that, but
nope.
we did not do that because we wanted this to be organic and real. And so, my why am I doing this? Why is it important? Well, so a couple of things actually, and they kind of go in ascending order. So about 10 years ago now, I'm actually looking at the book. I'm trying to see when it was. I think the book was actually published uh, in 2010. So it's 11 years old now. So I wrote this book, Dad from a Distance, and it was kind of and it 2010, I believe, is when you graduated from college, if I'm remembering
Yes.
correctly. And so I wrote it then. I always thought I would write a book, but I thought it would be about business or leadership or service and all the stuff that I always talked about. But uh, when I knew you were graduating college, it felt like a rite of passage almost. And so I said, well, let me just capture some thoughts. And so, in very old school style with a yellow legal pad, I started writing, and my fingers were cramping. I couldn't stop. I could not stop writing. Um, so, but that's only part of the why. I mean, the book happened, but it's what happened after the book that's important. So I got a chance to do a couple of seminars. Uh, People who know you and know me know that I've done a couple of those over the years. But I actually got invited to do one for Impact Church in Atlanta because they were doing small groups, just kind of small group study, and on different topics so that people could get to know each other and stuff. And I was like, well, you know, I I tell people all the time, and I'll say it again here, that I don't have property in um, Heathenville anymore. Actually, I don't live there, but I do have property there. Is the thing. So, so I thought this would be a way for me to kind of tell a story. And Angie Johnson, who will probably see this at some point in time, uh, was the coordinator of that. So we did this thing where we were put the word out to the entire church that we were going to have this Dad from a Distance thing, and it was around Father's Day, and so the word went out, and the registration thing went out. And for it seems like for a couple of weeks or so, Angie was really nervous because she's like, nobody's signing up. Nobody's signing up. And we had rented this place and set up breakfast, everything. She's like, nobody's signing up. Nobody's signing up. And I was like, don't worry. Uh, we will serve who comes. And even up to like the day before, I think like maybe 6 guys showed up. And so this was going to be a guy only event. So Angie and I were there setting the morning, and she's like, what if nobody comes? I said, don't worry. Don't worry. And about 10 minutes before start time, guys started filing in. And before we knew it, there were like 35 men there, which told me something. Which is part of the why of doing this, is that even then, I know a lot of those guys were not going to be, putting their name in a registration and who sees this and who knows I'm coming. And because that's not how guys tend to operate, especially around this. So that was one of the big things, is like, we need a space. Guys need a space to be able to talk about and hear this stuff without necessarily feeling like they're being watched while they're doing it.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons that I think this is so important. But we did a second one, which even changed the dynamic a little bit more. So we did another one, and people really liked it. So we said, okay, we'll do another one. And so we were going around the room, and typically what we do in those seminars, people go around the room. I have everybody introduce themselves. I have them say their children's names, which is really interesting because dads from a distance tend to say their daughter or their son, but they don't tend to say their names. So, and as every guy was doing it, they were just breaking down in tears, because that's like the firewall if you break through. So we were going around the room, and there was this really young guy there. He looked like he was in his early 20s or so, but that was not unusual. I mean, we had guys that were 25 and guys that were 75, because this journey doesn't stop when your kid graduates high school or college or gets married or any of that stuff. So we got around to this one guy, really, really young. And so we said, okay, so, what's your name? What's your kid's name? He said, well, I'm not really a dad. That's not why I'm here. And so the whole room just froze. And so the question was, well, what brought you here? And he said, I came here so maybe I could understand where my dad was coming from. And I was like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so it kind of reminded me that, while I was doing it and having these conversations from a dad's point of view, that's not the only point of view. And what a lot of people don't know, there's a lot of people that have bought this book over time, but they don't know that you wrote the foreword to the book.
Right.
And what a lot of people don't know is that for a lot of people who got the book, that was their favorite part. They were like, yes. They absolutely were just like, people were telling me I was in tears reading what your daughter wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And the last part of the foreword says, simply put, my dad has always been there for me and always will be. Don't you want your son or daughter to say the same?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking your voice needs to be here, because very often your friends may hear your side, but they don't know their dad's side. And, guys talking may know our side, but we don't know your side. And I've gotten a couple of notes from people, Danielle, that are people that are older than me that are watching this from your point of view.
Right.
Because they were that kid. And I have people that have sent me notes that are 25 that are watching it from my point of view, because they're already a dad from a distance. Because once this is a thing, it's always a thing. It just doesn't ever, it evolves over time. So that's why I'm so excited that people are joining. We actually had no idea whether anybody was going to watch or not. We hoped. There were a lot of likes and comments and stuff, but I think you and I would probably do this either way.
Because I
because
think it feels purposeful. It feels like, this perspective jointly needs to be heard. And it's so funny. I wrote that forward very easily. And it was very much from what I remember, which is really interesting. I really should just reread it, because I was like, hey, what did I say?
I'll send you another copy. Yeah.
What did I say? But I think it was just really about, and it's in our. Let me finish that. It's really about how important it is, and how I did not feel like you were not present just because you didn't live in the home with me. And I think that there's so many people, friends of mine, that are very disappointed with their fathers then and even now, expecting a relationship to just blossom, because they're not adults, or they're adults now. Like, oh well, you could call me, but it's a very interesting experience. So I'm just happy to do this. And I'm really interested to hear people's questions and comments as we go through, because there's a lot of people that have witnessed us. I'm sure there's a lot that it's like, oh gosh, there goes Greg and Danielle, the Grays, coming out. And so many people have said it's perfection, and it looks perfect and all those things, and that's just not true.
No.
And I have my experiences, my dad has his, and there's so many that I didn't even. There's moments that you've had, moments that I didn't even know were moments for you that I don't even remember.
Yes,
so
yes.
I think that those are just that's really, really interesting and fun.
Well, yes, and so what we're going to do over the course, and we'll do these every couple of weeks or so, probably this same time, because this is kind of a comfortable time for a lot of people, is looking at different segments of this journey. So, we're going to talk today about, like, from ground zero. In fact, I think the first thing I called it was so heavy I couldn't think about it, but it was the initial trauma. Because there is an initial trauma. All the way through Waffle House, which people will get in a few minutes over the course of this thing.
Are you from Atlanta? Yes.
Yes. But also, we'll do one that deals with holidays and visitation, because that's a completely different thing. And then we'll do one that talks about, well, what if when other people get in the mix, because I got remarried. So how does that play? we'll talk about you know, activities and sports and, you know, and attendance, and actually also talk about some of the things that I want to remind at least some of the dads about in the book, about things that are just important to do to make sure that you are not complicating your ability to be able to have a great relationship with your daughter or your son, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
So so there's a lot. So, and you know, we don't know where most of these are going. I mean, we have like kind of like a stick man that we put together.
Right.
But it is going to be, it's going to be fun to
Mm-hmm.
see and interesting, and hopefully people will comment and they'll ask questions and they'll say, well, what did you deal with this, or how did you handle that? And what I can guarantee you is that one of the reasons that our relationship has is what it is and continues to be what it continues to be is that um, we have one of the most frank and honest relationships of my entire life, Danielle and I. I mean, there's nothing that we don't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Even when
so,
it's tough.
yeah, yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
even especially when it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Mm-hmm.
has been tough on
Yeah.
occasion. We'll talk about that too,
Yeah.
because knowing how to have those kind of conversations is also really important. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why we're here. Uh,
Oh.
yes, I hope you guys. This is going to be on Facebook. I know some people are actually watching and commenting. It's on YouTube as well, so people will be able to see later. I would encourage you, if you haven't already done so, that if you think this might be a help to somebody else, that you go ahead and share it.
Yeah.
You can actually share it while we're in the middle of it, and see whether we can bring some more people into the fold and have a really cool, meaningful conversation. So, all of that said, so let's get to what probably is going to be the one of the toughest things for me. I told people they probably need to have some tissue ready.
Mm-hmm.
Both of us are emotional, so I'm probably more so, I would guess. But so let's start with start at the beginning. By the way, forgot to say something, Danielle.
Okay.
You and I both know that a lot of people have been part of this journey.
Yes.
So it's never been just me and you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so, but we are going to be, one of the things that we want to do is to make sure that we focus on our part of it, because we haven't asked a whole bunch of people a bunch of permission to weave
Right.
into this.
Right.
Although we might do that down the line, who knows?
Right.
That might be part of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but um, we do recognize that, you know, without family, this just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And without friends, it just doesn't work. And there are some friends that are as strong as family that we have met over the time. I mean, I don't even remember how many daughters I have now
Mm-hmm.
across your lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all mean the world to me. So they're all part of it. So, okay. So the initial, I mean, ground zero, the initial trauma. So I'm going to ask you, because this was 1993.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what do you remember?
Nothing. So I don't okay, so the things that I do remember,
Okay.
to be completely honest, I remember a moment where, and this could be completely fabricated, which I learned in psychology class in college. You
Mhm.
you want to create this moment. I have no clue if it really happened or not.
Okay.
So you can tell me if it did.
Fair enough.
So I remember you like bending down and saying basically saying bye to me, like before you left out of our first house with my
Mhm.
mom, and I remember thinking that, like, what did I do? I do remember that. Um because it's like, well, you guys were fine before I got here. What? Because that's my perception. I'm
Mhm.
grown enough to know that that's probably not the case now. But at the time,
Mhm.
I thought, I was like, what did I do? And I also saw different sides of my parents that I did. Like, usually I feel like before that, it was like a together thing. It was like, those are my parents. But after that, it's only been my mom and my dad. They're very separate. So that's what I remember. I remember being confused. I remember going to Nana's house and like, what do we, okay. I love Nana's house, so that's fine. Um, but overall, I don't remember too much about the initials. I just know what happened after that. Um, so yeah, that's my experience. It was very short and sweet. I don't at five, I think 5 or 6. I don't
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
much then at all.
So it's really interesting that you say that
Hmm.
because I think that, well, not I think, I know that one of the heavier things for me over the years was that you remembered that moment as clearly as I did.
Hmm.
And that even if you have a construct of it, and you're
Hmm.
not far off, because I'll tell you exactly how it
Okay.
happened, which she has never heard before,
I've
by the way.
never heard this. No.
Um, but that's one of the things that it becomes such a weight is that she will remember this moment. And this is the moment that broke her heart, and all this stuff. And so I will tell you, it like much of our journey, especially in these pivotal moments, I do not remember the date at all.
Hmm.
I just don't remember the date. I believe it was an evening.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't remember the date. And I don't know whether I don't remember the date because whether it was, maybe I
Yeah.
showed up in your
Same.
psychology class, whether because I didn't want to memorialize it as a day because I knew it would keep coming up. So I didn't want that day I don't know why. I just don't. But I
Right.
do remember the details. So in our living room at the time, we had this 3-piece living room set that was kind of a bluish, it had kind of a velveteen type of cover on it, and these I remember it had like these wheat the design on it was like these little pieces of wheat that were almost like the exact same color as this background on this. So I remember, and let me back up a little bit. One of the things that I knew was going to be tough because I knew I was going to this conversation as soon as because it was my decision to leave.
Hmm.
uh, I was less than a perfect husband, and there's a lot of people I can probably relate to that. But I do remember that your mom told me, you have to tell Danielle. And I knew I would have to, but something about when she said that, I was like, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Hmm.
So so then I started trying to rehearse all these different ways I was going to say it, and none of them were working. But I do remember that night. So you're right. I don't even know if you remember the house, but if you're facing the fireplace, the
Hmm.
love seat was on the left-hand side of the room.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we were sitting on the floor in front of the love seat. So you were on the floor. I kneeled down and sat
Yeah,
on
I
the floor
remember
next
that.
to you.
Yep. Hmm.
And I said to you,
Hmm.
uh, I'm not going to be living here anymore. And that was a hard thing to say, but that wasn't the hardest thing because you've always been an inquisitive child. So I knew once I said it, I knew what was going to follow. And you looked me right in the eye because you started crying. I
Hmm.
started crying. Shocker.
Same.
Shocker. Yeah. And you said, why? And I don't remember what I said.
Hmm.
I said something,
Hmm.
but I don't remember what I said because all I remembered is how you looked. And so, as a takeaway for people that are watching, very often it's there's a chance that people think that if a guy goes through this, that it is something that he just washes his hands of. I can guarantee you that even the most irresponsible among us, and there are some irresponsible dads, and I have never been a defender of them ever. But I can tell you that that moment, besides my dad dying, was the worst moment of my life.
Mhm.
And I think I've probably said this out loud in terms of what actually happened
Mhm.
one time.
Yeah.
And a bunch of people are watching it happen live uh, on
This is
Facebook.
I've never heard this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so um, it was traumatic. It
Mhm.
was traumatic. I'll tell you what else I remember, because there's a couple of guys actually that are on here that are saying they understand.
Mhm.
They know what it's like. There's probably some kids on here that know what it's like
Yeah.
as well. Um, I remember that it was almost 4 years before I could sleep more than 1 hour at a time. 4 years. And I would literally wake up on the hour, because back then I had the little, um, the clock radio, the little
Yeah.
LED clock
Yeah.
thing. And so I would literally wake up, and it was almost like exactly 60 seconds every time. And it was the weirdest thing.
Mhm.
So if I woke up at 12:06, then I woke up at 1:06, and I woke up at 2:06. It was always like exactly 60 minutes. And it
Mhm.
was that way for 4 years that I did not. And then it didn't go from 1 hour to 8 hours. It went from 1 hour to 2 hours. And
Mhm.
then for a couple of more years, it was 2 hours, and it went to 3 hours.
Mhm.
So it was that moment that you kind of remember in
Yeah.
general, you
Yeah.
remember better than you thought you did,
Yeah.
because what you pictured with me kneeling down and actually saying that to you was almost exactly the way it happened. But
Yeah.
I can tell you, I can remember that moment like a painting,
Uh,
like a video that plays
mhm.
back and forth in my mind. And so um, all of us don't talk about that. Dads, I would say, that
Mhm.
very rarely even mention that moment.
Mhm.
Um, but for those of you watching, it's a moment that is seared into your soul. I mean, it is, and it's a wound that, even though it's self-inflicted uh, to some degree, it scars over, but it never really heals. And as we talk about, this journey as we go along, it's amazing how there are moments that take me right back to that moment.
Yeah.
I, and most of which I never said to you, ever said to you, because I would not want this. And why it's cool that we're talking about it since you're 33
Yeah.
is that it doesn't have the same burden. This
Right.
is never something you should tell a 10-year-old,
Right.
or because it's too heavy.
Yeah.
It was too heavy
And you
for a
don't even
33-year.
understand it. I honestly don't think I would have been able to even understand it
Right.
until at least 25. Isn't that when your brain like fully developed? Like, I mean,
I
I
don't
don't.
know. I look, if you check my brain at 25, I don't think I would not be evidence of,
Well,
of
and
my
I
brain.
got a question for you.
Yeah.
So, what was it that was traumatizing about it? Did it feel like you were disappointing me? Like, what was it? Or was it that you really wanted to still be like, what was
That
the,
is that's a great question.
mhm,
And the answer is that uh, I felt like there were a lot of things that I had broken,
mhm,
but you were the only thing that wasn't.
mhm, mhm.
I mean, you were my one perfect thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I am bragging when I say this. As
Thanks.
dads go, I
Mhm,
mean, from the time you breathe your first breath,
mhm,
uh, you were the one perfect thing.
mhm,
And even, I mean, there was some piece of it that had to do with divorce, because my parents, your grandparents,
mhm,
uh, were together their entire lives. So there
mhm.
was some piece of that, why can't I make it when they could make
Right.
it thing? But that was really more in the background. The biggest thing was you were that one perfect thing.
Mhm.
And I could not figure out, like,
Mhm.
how am I breaking
Yeah.
this one perfect thing? And so that was
Mm,
that was it. That was a big
yeah.
part of it. So
That like I'm trying to remember after that. I remember um I just remember the not because I felt and remember I don't remember that much, but I
right.
remember you being upset too, which
Mhm.
was kind of confusing because I'm like, well,
You're the one that's leaving.
are
Why are you
you
mad?
you don't have to do this, brother. Like, what are we doing? But that it makes sense. It makes sense, especially being on the other side of from child. That's 28 years ago. I mean,
Mhm.
um, we have so much to cover.
Oh
There's
boy.
so much
Do
here.
we not? Yes.
Uh, but just like that, being on the other side of that, I understand when you know you have to make hard decisions
Mhm.
for everybody's betterment.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always feel good. So
Well,
yeah.
I'll tell you something that you said, because you've always been wise beyond your years,
Mhm,
always, always, always.
mhm.
Which is so when you asked me that question, why, it wasn't like a 5-year-old asking me why. It was like
Right.
I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to give her a really scripted answer, or a really polished answer. I probably just stumbled through it. I
It was
don't.
great. It was
Yeah.
great. It was great.
But what I do remember you saying when you were like 6,
Mhm.
and you may not remember this,
I
but
have no clue what you're
you
about to say.
you said, um, you and mommy seem like you're happier apart than you are together
Mhm.
when you were 6. And you
Mm.
said it without that was not a response to a question,
Right,
really.
right, right.
We were just talking about something,
Mhm,
and it was, and there's a takeaway for people that are listening or watching.
mhm,
Uh, don't underestimate the level of perception that your child or that the child operates with.
mhm,
Even though you may not have had all the tools to figure out what that meant exactly, you knew it. And when you said that, I remember when you said that, it gave me, and this probably sounds bad, but it gave me a little bit of peace,
mhm, mhm,
because I my worst nightmare, once I knew that this was going to be my life, was to be the villain, to be that guy,
mhm.
the guy that stereotypically, doesn't do this, doesn't do that for the child. In fact, um, I think it's safe to say, more than safe to say, that I actually became a better dad.
Mm.
As good a dad as I thought I was, I actually became a better dad and a better man after,
I
because
believe that. I
because
believe that.
yeah, come
Mhm,
hell or high water,
mhm.
you know, I I dented this car, but I did not total it. It's kind
Right.
of a
Mhm.
way of thinking about it. And so yeah, so you really were very insightful even then. So
And I still believe that to this day. That's something that I've brought up to you and my mom is that I
mhm,
felt like I met both of you even deeper by I think like sometimes it's great if your marriage works, but I think because it was so separate and I was getting you completely one on one, I was getting more of each of my parents. So I think that was really cool. I think as you go into which we'll go into high school and that's where it was tough and difficult to manage, especially with it being one of me between you two.
mhm.
There was that. But overall, I really think I met both of you better, or I had more moments with you after that. And
Yeah.
I think it was a hard decision, but I do think it was a good decision. Yeah.
Well, who knows in the moment, right? I mean, you and I have talked about this, because we talk relationships too.
Hmm.
That in the moment, you have to make the best decision that you know how to make in the moment,
Right.
because no one has a crystal ball. No one's perfect. Uh, you know, it takes two to tango, and it's it probably does happen that there are relationships that struggle because of one person only.
Mhm.
But the fact is that almost every relationship, even the ones that stay together, quite frankly,
Mhm.
have plenty of dirt.
Yeah.
It's funny, that you were talking about that and families together, because there are a lot of dads that are at a distance that are actually in their home with their
Mm.
kids. And so for us, it was a physical distance, but really the big challenge is how to make it not be an
Right.
emotional distance, because proximity is not the point here. I mean, at the same time, this was going on. My business, the traveling business,
And
was
that's
starting to kick off.
I was just about to say, I mean, we're
Yeah,
talking about times two here.
yeah,
Talking about my dad not being in the home with my mom and I. And then we're talking about my dad being traveling the world seemingly to me,
mhm.
it may have just been, but it was everywhere. I was getting magnets in which you can go into.
Yeah.
Uh,
We should talk about that
yeah,
because
it,
um,
it was big. It was big for me because I do remember that. I remember you not being there, but we talked all the time. I also want to shout out to my mom and my dad that I got my own phone line so that I could talk to you, whenever I wanted to, and her not try to control that, which I really think was helpful. I mean, at the time there's no cell phones, which that sounds crazy. Um,
yeah,
so am I getting old? No,
a
there's
little
no
bit
cell
older. Remember, just ER. We just
phone
put
there.
ER on the end of it. Yeah.
But what I remember was that my dad was always present. So I would get, the postcards from different places. I would, and with the written note, and I was like, oh wow, he's in California and looking at this, and I felt a part. So I think that was one of the biggest things for me were those postcards during that time because I don't remember a lot. I do remember having great times, which we go to the Waffle House. It's probably a perfect segue. Um,
Yeah.
was that's what I remember. I remember the Waffle House, and I remember getting postcards a lot. And Waffle just. I mean, you can probably speak to the Waffle House because all I knew is that we were going to get something to eat with my dad.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, but what was it about? Like what brought about the Waffle House in general?
So,
We have so
so
many stories.
okay. So before we get to the Waffle House,
Okay.
let's go back to the postcards for a second,
Okay. Yes.
because I think it speaks to, and it's just one of the things that I did, because there's a lot of things that you did too,
Hmm.
um, that speak to the importance of intentionality.
Hmm.
So when you are separated the way we uh, are the way we were in a physical sense, I think it is, uh, well, one of the things that I just was bound and determined is like, I am going to make this work. I mean, there was not a time when I was traveling that I was not thinking about how to make sure that you knew and felt I was present.
Hmm.
And when I was even if I wasn't traveling, there was not a time ever that I was not, like, does she know that I'm present?
I
How does she
felt
know that
that.
I'm
I
present?
felt
How
that
does she know that
100.
I'm present?
Mhm.
Because the postcard thing, which is interesting, because postcards are not a thing anymore, because people just take pictures on their phones and send them. But then postcards were a pretty big deal. So every place I went, I would send you a postcard that said, and it would always say something about the place where I
Yeah.
was.
Mhm.
So, which is fun because it was a touch point, but it's also like I wanted Danielle to know
Mhm.
about Chicago. I wanted her to know about Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I wanted her to know about Sacramento, California. So I would send the postcard, but it would also always have a little note about what was special about that particular place. And I did that on all those trips. Here's what's really striking that I didn't realize until much older. Probably you were in high school, because I mailed them all to, your house,
Mhm.
where you and your mom were, uh, that you kept all of them in
Mhm.
this little cameo box, the cameo box I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And uh, and I didn't assume that you threw them away. That wasn't it, because
Right.
I wasn't doing it. I wasn't doing it in the moment for you to accumulate this archive.
Right.
It really was moment by moment. But you had to be in maybe the 11th or 12th grade or something, and that little cameo box. I don't even know where you got it from,
Mhm.
but you opened it, and all the postcards were in there, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Kept all of these postcards.
Mhm.
And in the moment when I was sending them, I knew they were important. But this is a takeaway,
Mhm.
because there's some learning for people that are
Mhm.
watching this, is that those postcards seem significant in the moment, but they didn't feel like they had any shelf life, really, to me. I just wanted Danielle to know, when I was not there this week, where I was and what's special about where I was. But there are no insignificant touch points. There are none. I mean, the way you had them, and for those of you who don't know what I mean by a cameo box, it's a very special, ornate, beautiful thing. So this is not a shoe box.
Mhm.
It's like a jewelry box, really, what you had them in. And
Mhm.
that they were there because they were a reminder. They were precious. It was, when I saw it, I was like, this is Danielle holding on to me all these years.
Mhm.
And so it's like I experienced it all over again. And
Mhm.
so, dads, it is there is no insignificant touch.
And it wasn't games, it wasn't, the latest Nintendo 64,
Nope.
which, I mean, it was postcards, and, I think that it's the thought. Like, my dad is thinking about me right now across the country,
Yep. Mm.
and thought about me, and there's another piece that I wanna encourage, as well, is there something you always said at the bottom of every postcard, which is, "I love you more than infinity."
Mm.
And I think another takeaway, which you can tell them how we came up with this in the first place, but what was really important to me, and which I think is a big takeaway, is creating your own special language, your own special thing, because
Mhm.
us be like me saying I love you more than infinity, nobody could take that away. That
Right.
was our language. And still to this day, if anybody has overheard us talk, is like, what, who is she talking to? I'm like, what's up, player? But
That's how we talk to each other. Yeah.
it is, and it's special to us because I don't talk to anybody else like that. And so it goes to, like, us creating handshakes, and those things are probably the most important to me. I don't remember the physical things at this point. I mean, I know that they were there, but I think the big thing was those things that somebody can't take away.
Mhm.
I love you more than infinity is something we're gonna say forever. You
Well,
know.
it's funny that that you're talking about that. One of the things that a lot of people may not be aware of is that it's exceptionally easy to get married. It's a lot more difficult to get divorced.
Hmm.
Um, so when we got divorced, your mom and I, uh, in the county where we were, you actually had to go to basically a divorce class. It was so. I mean, you had to do it. It was not. You could not be divorced. So there would be all these people, and it was like a amphitheater kind of room, and it was very weird because everybody in there knew why
Right.
everyone was in there, and it was a little
Had to be some
creepy.
weird energy in there.
Yeah,
Not a
oh yeah. It was a little creepy because there were people that looked like they were kind of like looking for the next person in there. It was just strange.
right, right.
Um, but one of the things they talked about was, especially to dads, is not to be, and they used this term. They said, "Don't try to be a Disney dad."
Mm.
And was it Disney dad? Disney dad? What does that mean? And they said, because you will have a tendency, and they were speaking to dads, you will have a tendency to want to overcompensate. You're going to want to go buy bicycles and go on trips and you want to be super dad. You're going to be doing a lot of stuff that you weren't doing before
Mm-hmm.
because you're trying to prove, maybe to yourself, or maybe and maybe not even to your kid that much, because the kids, as we now know, value a postcard more than they value a bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
But not to do all that stuff, that stuff is not important in the long run. But the "I love you more than infinity" actually was a conversation that we had when you were probably 6 or
Mm-hmm.
7. And so we were doing this thing where we were talking about how much we love each other. And so how much, how much.
Can you guys picture this
Yes,
moment? I
yes,
can't. I
yes,
already.
yes. How much do you love? How much do you love me? I love you a lot. And it was like, then we started doing numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of you who saw Avengers Endgame, there's a scene where at the end that I actually cried about because it reminded me when he says to his daughter, "I love you 3,000." So
Mm-hmm.
that's what we were doing. So I love you a million. I love you a billion. And
Mm-hmm.
you said, uh, so what's the biggest number, Dad? Because we have been going back and forth on this to see, and our arms were like wide open and all this kind of stuff. You said, "What's the biggest number, Dad?" And I said, "Well, the biggest number is infinity." And you said, "Well, I love you more than infinity."
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
And that became our thing to this day.
This
When
day.
we
So.
we if we send each other something or text each other, "I
Mm-hmm.
love you more than infinity." Now we do it with different icons that represent all those,
Yeah.
but it's been a thing since then.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so Melissa, who is one of my other children, is
Yeah.
watching.
Best friend.
Imlo, yes, from way, way, way back.
Uh-huh.
Um, she said the magnets, so she knows about the magnets. So here's the
Oh
thing.
yeah, that's right. Okay, that's what she's talking about.
Yes,
That's
the
yeah, yeah.
magnets, because
Uh-huh.
all your friends knew
Mm-hmm.
about the magnets.
Mm-hmm.
Because in every place, now you mentioned going to Nana's house, and I'm
Yeah.
going to try to be efficient with this because we said no more than an hour, but we got to do the Waffle House.
You're right.
So uh, when your mom and I separated initially, I went to live at my parents' house as a
Mm-hmm.
grown man, which I can't even tell you how many different things were going on in my head as a grown man to go live back with your parents. But, you know, where was I going?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then we lived in an apartment for about a year. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if you remember the
I
apartment.
remember the apartment
But
very, very well.
yes, but here's the thing. I don't remember I remember your room in the apartment. I don't even really remember my room.
I
Um,
remember your room was just
it was
downstairs. Yeah,
downstairs. I
yeah,
don't remember the kitchen. I don't remember much about the furniture. I just remember your room. And then a year after that, I bought a house.
right.
And in that house, I don't remember. I kind of remember the living room. I remember the TV, but you know what I remember more than anything else?
My room.
Your bedroom,
Yeah, same.
because
Mhm.
your bedroom, and having your bedroom have stuff in it already was
Mhm.
really important to me.
Mhm.
So, and by your stuff, it probably didn't make any sense, but I mean, you had socks, you had underwear, you had shoes, you had clothes, because I never wanted there to be even a blink of the eye if you were ready to come see me for any reason, that
Mhm.
you could just come without having to do the duffel bag thing.
Right, right. Mhm.
Um, so because you always having a space wherever I've been has always been really important to me. I
Mhm.
didn't want you ever to be where I was and be in a spot that felt temporary,
Right.
or like it was only for every other weekend or
Mhm.
that kind of thing. That was one of those. I was just hell bent on things.
Mhm.
Um, but the Waffle House is kind of connected to this. So right after we were separated, for a while, because your mom worked a little later in the evening, I would actually come pick you up from a unique learning academy,
Mhm.
and I would take you back to you and your mom's house until she got there.
Mhm.
So for a while, that was the thing, even on weekdays and everything.
Mhm.
And so because the divorce did not happen until like the next summer or something.
Mhm.
Um, I don't remember that date either, interestingly, because those things just blur.
Yeah.
But after a while, we started. I s- it, my residence that was temporary at my mom's house. So I don't. You probably remember the run now. From you would leave the house from where we were, and you would go to I-20, and then I-20 would head across the city to where my mom and dad's house was.
Mhm.
So right there before you get on the highway was Waffle House. And so on the Fridays that it was my weekend, uh, we always went to Waffle House on that Friday
Mhm.
because it was on the way. That's how it kind of turned out.
Yeah. Mhm.
Because those of you who understand divorce decrees and all this kind of stuff, there's a time that you're supposed to pick your kids up. By the way, uh, dads, never make your child wait.
Mhm.
Never make your child wait, because I'd heard about this before from other um, people that had kind of told me what was going on. That if you're supposed to pick your kid up at 6 o'clock, 6:01 feels like 9 o'clock to your child, because whether you know it or not, they're standing at the door waiting for you, and every tick of the clock that you're late is an eternity for them.
Mhm.
So 6 o'clock was the time. Usually I was in the vicinity before that, but I just didn't want to be, rude and get you early. So we would go to the Waffle House,
Mhm.
and we would go to the Waffle House and we would just talk. And so it became a thing that we were like I don't know if you remember this, but all the waitresses in the Waffle House knew us.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
went to the Waffle House so often and over such a period of time. I don't know if you remember this, but they
So
actually changed the syrup, the flavor of the
I
syrup.
do remember that. We were like,
And
"What's
we,
going on here?"
and we noticed, we're like, this is not the same syrup y'all normally have. That's literally how often we went to the Waffle House. But it wasn't really just the Waffle House. It was
Mhm.
because it was the spot between getting to my parents' house where there were people there.
Yeah.
So
It
that
was
was
our
it
space.
was our time,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely, and that's what the Waffle House represented.
And the Waffle House represents something very different to me.
Okay.
Um, Waffle House was where I learned a lot.
Hmm.
You taught me a lot of things in Waffle House, educationally, like how to solve for X. Um,
Oh, you
how,
remember that. That
yeah,
was kind of the
that's what I remember. I remember um, learning how to tip. So nowadays, like people are like, "Wow, did you just come up with this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've been doing this for a very long time." Or figuring out tax or adding, whatever that was. That was what I remember. I remember, and if anybody that is watching does not know, I'm a speaker just like my father. Surprise, surprise. But I believe that those moments, even in the Waffle House, I remember you having me say the alphabet without the LMNOP. That it was LMNOP, which was interesting because I got teased for it because then you talk white, which is just that whole statement should just go away.
I
Uh,
don't know that.
if I talk right, it should not indicate my race. Um, but but that's what I remember was just being very much ahead of the curve when I got to school, knowing how to do these things already, and that I think gave me so much confidence. Actually, now that I think about it, it gave me a lot of confidence in school and why I think I did so well initially. Really the whole time, because I understood that. And you also made learning fun. We made up all the songs
Mm,
um, to learn how to spell. Like these are definitely things that's what I remember about Waffle House because I don't think I put together that it was in between one place and the other.
mm.
It was just a place we went to get an all-star special and talk and I was just like, okay, let me learn how to do this. So it's just interesting how, and I was also very open at the time when I was that age, somewhere between 13 and 24. I'm not so open. Uh, but the other thing, I did want to get back to the magnets, just
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
to. But what Melissa, my best friend, is saying is that along with the postcards, at some point, I think we started to segue into magnets.
Hmm.
So in my room in my dad's house, I had, and we made these ourselves. We learned how to, went to Home Depot and made this big old, magnet board.
With a sheet metal, this big piece of sheet
Yeah,
metal.
yeah, there was two of them, and they were where I put all my magnets from where he was. So whether we did the postcards, because I think it ended up being eventually more so magnets after a
Hmm.
while. That was
Yeah.
kind of the segue, but it was the same thing. It was the thought that I'm being thought of
Well,
when I'm not around.
and picture picture somewhere probably around because we had to end up making two boards. Remember?
Yeah, yeah,
So there were probably 150 magnets.
yeah.
And so those of you who travel know that in the gift shop, they usually have the little magnets. And
Mhm.
so it would be the magnet from wherever the place was. And then it would get tricky because I would go to a place like Chicago where I'd been before, but I would have to get a different magnet because it
Right.
couldn't be the same one. So I had to
Had
remember which magnet was that I got before. So in
to.
Danielle's bedroom, this whole wall was filled with magnets. But
Mhm.
the point is that um, to make make sure that Danielle always for her to know that I was present for her was really important. I mean, in future episodes, I guess we'll call them,
Mhm.
we'll talk about, doing homework while I was on the road.
Mhm.
And by the way, for those of you who don't know this, back then, if you were making a long distance phone call, it was probably $2 a minute. And we would be studying definitions for 30 minutes over the
Mhm.
phone when I'm in,
No
I
clue.
don't know.
Had no clue.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But because
That was
that's what we would have done if I was there.
right.
And because I wasn't there, and someone even asked me, they were like, "Wow, that's a lot of money, isn't it?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't understand your point. What do you spend your money on?
Right.
What is more important than that?"
And
So,
and there's something else I want to add to this, which for people that are watching, because I've gotten this feedback so many times. Well, not everybody's like your dad. My dad would never do that, or my dad would never do this. And I think they may not. Let's say they won't. Let's say they are not. They are not. I've seen it, and I felt for people that did not have that. But I think the bigger part of this, at least what I see, is that it's possible.
mm,
Because I see so many women, or even men that say, that's just not, but we don't do that. Like, there's not any good black fathers, or there's not any, there's no good fathers out there it's not possible. And I think, if anything, I want to get across is that it is possible, that relationship is possible. And even if you are having kids, you can be that. It's,
yeah.
it's possible. And, um, and I've turned out pretty cool. I think.
Well, you turned out more than cool, and
Thank.
the what you just shared was really big.
Hmm.
So I just want to will probably be the cap for what we're
Yeah.
talking about here,
Mhm.
uh, because it is possible and it's never too late.
Yeah.
Would be the other one.
Hmm.
It will be much harder the longer you wait.
Yeah.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it because a lot of those wounds run deep and they
Yeah.
cut deep. And forgiveness is a very difficult thing when you have felt pain over a much longer period of time.
Hmm.
But it is possible.
Hmm.
In that first Dad from a Distance workshop, I told you there was a guy that was like 70 years old there.
Hmm.
His son was 46. And he was there because he was still trying to figure it out.
Hmm.
And I was probably more proud of him than anybody else in that room. because most people would have been, well, it's what it is. It is what it is. We'll move on. You know, I gave it my best shot.
Yeah.
But there's a compound effect to this. And so you can decide to make this effort, but you also, for those of you who are on the kids side, just to shout out Danielle, she was open to it. Even when it was difficult, she was still open to it. One of my favorite quotes is a guy named Lewis Smead, because forgiveness is a lot of this. And the quote goes something like this: to forgive is to set a prisoner free and then realize that the prisoner is you. It doesn't work perfectly, but it does work if you make it a thing to make it work. So this is the first one, Danielle.
That felt good. I hope
wow.
you guys enjoyed that.
Yes.
I mean,
so we'll be back here in like 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
And we'll figure out what the topic is, and we'll shout it out on Facebook and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. Getting my Instagram game is getting up a little bigger, but yes, I'm working on it. But we are excited about this. Thank you guys for hanging in there and listening and loving on us a little bit. And hey, put some stuff in the comments. We'll respond to it because we're going back to look now. Remember, share this out with people that you know. Who knows? Maybe there's something else that can happen, that maybe some more people can love somebody more than infinity. Or maybe they can just say it. How about that? All right. By the way, Danielle, you know how much I love you?
More than infinity, player.
I love you more than infinity. You guys have a fantastic day. I love you, Danielle. I'll see you later.
I love you.
All right. Bye.